Listening. Pre-listening before you listen to the recording. Discuss. Do you like visiting museums? Why? Why not? Actually, I like visiting museums a lot, and of course it depends on what kind of museum it is. Depends on, well, my answer is affected by many factors, many conditions. If it's a cool museum and I get to see dinosaurs, then yes, I would love to see that. But generally speaking, in museums, we can see interesting exhibits. Exhibits, thing to see. This is an exhibit of a dinosaur that are unique, one of their kinds in some way, or can learn about different topics. Which of the following museums would you be most interested in visiting? Choose one. Abdul Rauf Khalil Museum, National Museum of Saudi Arabia, Madame Tussauds Waxwork Museum. In the picture, you can see the figure of a very famous physicist known as Albert Einstein. Well, that's not him. That's just a statue that is made of wax. Wax is a substance that is made of oil. And in this museum, you can see many celebrities, many known people, famous people. You can see them and they look very real. The London Dungeon. Dungeon is an underground prison. Which one would you choose? I would choose the National Museum of Saudi Arabia, and the reason is I am interested in the life and mission of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. 2. Listening for gist. Gist is the essence of the recording you will listen to, the recording as a whole. Before you listen, read the rubric. Where is the rubric? Here it is. Carefully to find out the situation, everything that is happening with all conditions that we have, and the topic discussed. Try to predict. When you predict, you expect what will happen, or guess what the speakers are going to say. That way, the listening text will be easier for you to understand. Read this and understand it. Try to guess what will the speaker say. That way, the listening will be easier. You will hear a conversation between a teenager, a boy who is between 13 and 19 years old, who has just come out of the London dungeon, and a man who is writing a report. A report is a written description of an event on London's tourist attractions. Tourist attractions are places or landmarks, important places that tourists visit when they go to a city. Which of the following are discussed? The location of the museum, what you can see, how to get there to the museum, who the museum is for. Is it for young people, for old people, for all ages? The entrance fee, the money you pay to gain access. Now, I will not play the recording to save time. We will read these questions and then we will listen to the recording. Listening for specific information. This is the opposite of this. Listening for gist, you try to understand the recording as a whole. In here, you want the details. Listen to the conversation again and complete the sentences below. The boy is in London with his brother and 2 friends. His recommended. When you recommend something, you think it's appropriate for someone. It is good for him to try. A visit to the London dungeon. The boys spent in total, altogether, the final amount, the final number, in the dungeon. The boy described the visit as scary, frightening, and what at the same time? The boys had to wait in a queue. They had to wait in line to get into the dungeon. Even approaching the ticket counter, getting closer to the ticket counter. It is the place where you can buy a ticket to get into the museum. Is scary because it is what? The guides are people who can give you information about the museum and they can show you around. Told the visitors about the of London, the rats. A rat is a rodent that looks like a mouse with a longer tail and a bigger body, smaller ears. That had brought is the past participle of bring. The Great Plague. Plague is a disease that is contagious. It can cause death to people. People could die of plague. Were killed by what? The boy definitely does not think it would be a good idea for nervous people. Nervous people, people who are easily agitated. To visit the dungeon. The boy would recommend a visit to the London dungeon, although in spite of the fact that he found it what? Now, listen to the recording.
Hello, excuse me. My name is Alan Wells, and I am writing a report on London's best tourist attractions. I see you've just come out of the London dungeon. Could I just ask you a few questions about your visit? It won't take long.
Yes, okay. Why not?
Thank you very much. First of all, a few details. How old are you?
17.
Did you go into the dungeon on your own, or did you go in a group?
I went in with my brother and 2 other friends of mine. We're all here on holiday together.
Okay, great. So, had you heard about the London dungeon before this visit?
Well, my uncle told me about it and said we really should come.
How long did your visit last?
Well, we were probably in there for nearly 2 hours altogether. But when I was inside, I had no idea really. You get moved on from room to room with your group. But I never felt like I was being rushed through.
How did you enjoy your visit?
Oh, it was fantastic. It was really scary, but very funny at the same time.
Can you describe what you enjoyed most about it?
Well, I didn't really know what to expect. So when we arrived, we were a bit surprised that there was a huge queue of people waiting to get in. That was one part I didn't like.
How long did you have to wait?
It must have been about 45 minutes. But it wasn't too bad, I suppose. Other people told me that they had waited much longer. I suppose it depends on the time of year. Well, anyway, once we got in, it was just amazing. Inside it is really dark, even before you get to the ticket counter, which makes it really scary.
What did you do inside the dungeon?
Well, the whole dungeon was divided up into different rooms, and in each place there were guys dressed up in costume, just as they would have been dressed in the past. They told us a lot about the history of London and the way people lived then.
Such as?
Well, in one room they told us about the Great Plague. It was an illness which spread through London and killed lots of people. It was brought in by rats, and they even had live rats in there. Yeah. They told us about the Great Fire of London, which actually killed all the rats which had brought the illness in. So it was educational too.
And what else was there to do?
Well, there were rides and people jumping out at you, trying to scare you. And they really did scare us. We were screaming like little kids. But it was great fun too.
Would you say it is suitable for young children?
No way. They actually say at the entrance that they strongly advise against taking small children in. I think it is perfect for teenagers and adults, as long as you're not too nervous.
So, would you recommend the London dungeon to others?
Oh yes, absolutely. It was quite expensive to get in, but it was definitely worth it. It was fantastic.
Great. Well, thanks very much for your time.
My pleasure. Bye.
Bye.
Now, if you need to listen to the recording again, please stop this video and listen to the recording as many times as you want and answer the questions. Now, to the listening transcript. Hello, excuse me. My name is Alan Wells and I am writing a report on London's best tourist attractions. I see you've just come out of the London dungeon. Could I just ask you a few questions about your visit? It won't take long. Yes, okay. Why not? Thank you very much. First of all, a few details, a few specific information. How old are you? 17. I am a teenager. Did you go into the dungeon on your own all by yourself, without family or friends, or did you go in a group? I went in with my brother and 2 other friends of mine. We are all here on holiday together. The boy is in London on holiday with his brother and 2 friends. Okay, great. So, had you heard about the London dungeon before this visit, or was it your first time you hear about it? Well, my uncle is the one who told me about it and said we really should come. His uncle recommended a visit. How long did your visit last? Continue for 2 hours, 3 hours? Well, we were probably, maybe, in there for nearly almost 2 hours. All together. All together means in total the same thing. Means the final number is 2 hours. But when I was inside, I had no idea really. The 2 hours really finished quickly. You get moved on from room to room with your group, but I never felt like I was being rushed. I never felt like somebody was trying to move me quickly from one room to another through. How did you enjoy your visit? Well, it was fantastic, amazing. It was really scary, but very funny at the same time. It was scary and funny at the same time. Can you describe what you enjoyed most about it? Well, I didn't really know what to expect. I didn't know what things I would see. So when we arrived, we were a bit surprised, a little surprised that there was a huge queue, very long line of people waiting to get in. That was one part I didn't like, waiting in line. How long did you have to wait? It must have been about almost around 45 minutes. 45 minutes to get into the museum, the dungeon. But it wasn't too bad, I suppose, I think. Other people told me that they had waited much longer. I think it depends on the time of year. In which month did you visit? Well, anyway, once we got in, once means the minute we got in, it was just amazing. Inside it is really dark, not much light. You can't see very well. Even before you get to the ticket counter, you use even if you want to follow it with something surprising. Even before you get to the ticket counter, which makes it really scary. What did you do inside the dungeon? So approaching the ticket counter was scary because it was dark. Well, the whole dungeon was split into different rooms, and in each place there were guides. Dressed up, they were wearing costume. This is not custom, it's costume. Costume, special clothing. Like if you are dressed up as Superman clothes, then that's a costume. Just as they would have been dressed in the past, they were wearing the same clothes people wore in the past. They told us a lot about the history of London and the way people lived then. They told us about the history and the way people lived then at that time in the past. Such as, like what? Can you give me an example? Well, in one room they told us about the Great Plague. It was an illness, a disease, which spread, moved everywhere through London and killed lots of people. It was brought in by rats, and they even had live rats in there. Inside the dungeon, they had live rats, not made of plastic. No, the rats were real. Ugh! They told us about the Great Fire of London. The Great Fire is what actually killed all the rats. The rats were killed by the Great Fire, which had brought the illness in. So it was educational too. You learn from your visit. And what else was there to do? Well, there were rides. Rides are large machines that people ride on for fun. And people jumping out at you, trying to scare you. And they really did scare us. We were screaming like little kids. When you scream, ah, you're screaming. But it was great fun too. Would you say it is suitable for young children? It is appropriate. Is it okay for young children to go? No way. Impossible. They actually say at the entrance that they strongly advise, they highly recommend against taking small children. You shouldn't take small children. Advise with an S is a verb. Advice with a C is a noun. So children or nervous people shouldn't visit the dungeon. I think it is perfect for teenagers and adults as long as if you are not too nervous. So would you recommend the London dungeon to others? Oh yes, absolutely, of course, surely. It was quite expensive. Quite expensive is just like very expensive, except that very is stronger. So it was expensive, but you can still pay the amount of money they want to get in. So it was expensive, but it was definitely worth it. It wasn't a waste of money. It was fantastic. Great. Well, thanks very much for your time. My pleasure. I was happy to do it. Bye. Bye. So we're back to this. Did they talk about the location of the museum? No, we don't know where it is. We know that it's in London. We don't know anything else. The things you can see? Yes. How to get to the London dungeon? No. Who the museum is for? Yes, it is for teenagers and adults. The entrance fee? Yes, it is expensive. We talked about this. Now, you will hear 5 different people talking about why they visited or moved to a particular place, a specific place. Choose from the list A to F the statement that best describes each speaker's experience. Use the letters only once, one time. These 6 letters, use each one of them only one time. Use C only with one of the speakers. There is one extra letter which you do not need to use. 5 speakers, 6 letters. One is extra. When doing a multiple matching listening task, a task is something that you must do. Remember to read through the statements carefully to get a clear idea of what you are listening for. Wait to hear the recording a second time before you make your final decision. You can do this in your own time. We will listen to the recording only once. Now, read the statements carefully. That will help you. I struggled to get used to my new surroundings. When you struggle, you work hard on something. To get used to adapt, the same thing. When you adapt, you get used to, which means it becomes normal for you. The new surroundings, the area around you. I found the locals to be very friendly and helpful. Locals, people who live there. I enjoyed exploring, finding out and learning about this new place? I found out a new talent, natural ability for something. I took a risk. When you take a risk, that means you endanger your money, your life. You put something to danger. That paid off. That got me a good result. I adapted. I got used to, easily, to a new lifestyle, a way of life. Now listen to the first recording.
Speaker 1.
I'd always wanted to visit Australia, and when my friend Brad, who lives in Sydney, invited me to his wedding, I accepted the invitation immediately. I arrived in Sydney about a week before the wedding and spent as much time as possible taking in the sights. I really liked the Sydney Aquarium. There's a glass chamber in the aquarium that allows visitors to get a close look at some incredible sea creatures, including sharks. All in all, my holiday was wonderful and I really enjoyed Brad's wedding. My only regret is that I never got to see a kangaroo.
I'd always wanted to visit Australia. I'd short for I had. And when my friend Brad, who lives in Sydney, invited me to his wedding is a celebration in which a man and a woman get married. I accepted the invitation immediately, at once, without delay. I arrived in Sydney about a week before the wedding and spent as much time as possible, a lot of time, as much as I can, taking in the sights, which means visiting important places in Sydney. I really liked the Sydney Aquarium. Aquarium is a huge container in which fish and sea animals are kept. There is a glass chamber in the aquarium, room in the aquarium that let visitors to get a close look. You can see, not from afar away, at some incredible sea creatures, amazing creatures, living things, water animals, including part of what you can see is sharks. All in all together, in total, my holiday was wonderful and I really enjoyed Brad's wedding. My only regret, the only thing I'm sorry about, is that I never got to see a kangaroo. I didn't see this animal. This one enjoyed exploring Sydney. Listen to the second recording.
Speaker 2.
When I received a letter informing me that I'd been accepted into the New York Academy of Art, I was absolutely thrilled. Still, as excited as I was also a little nervous about leaving home and moving to a new place all by myself. My first day in New York was overwhelming. It's a fast-paced city and it can be quite a challenge keeping up. It took me a few months to settle in and there were times when I felt quite homesick. Now I'm thoroughly enjoying my studies and I've just had a painting in an exhibition at the college. Who knows, maybe one day you'll see my work in an art gallery. Now wouldn't that be something?
When I received a letter informing me, telling me that I'd been accepted, they allowed me into the New York Academy. They let me in of art. I was absolutely thrilled, excited. Still, as excited as I was, even though I was very thrilled, very excited, I was also a little nervous about leaving home and moving to a new place all by myself, leaving my family. My first day in New York was overwhelming. Overwhelming is a feeling that you get when you have a lot to do and you don't know where to start. Or it is a feeling that you get when you feel confused and you don't know how to react. It's a fast-paced city. Things happen quickly and change quickly in New York, and it can be quite a challenge catching up with what's happening. It took me a few months. I needed a few months to settle in, to feel relaxed in my new home, and there were times when I felt quite homesick. Homesick when you feel sad because you miss your family and your hometown. Now, I am truly, completely enjoying my studies, and I've just had a painting in an exhibition. Exhibition is an event in which you can see work of art. At the college, who knows, maybe one day you will see my work in an art gallery. Gallery is a building or a place where you can see work of art. What's the difference between exhibition and gallery? Exhibition is the event. Gallery is the building, the place. Now, wouldn't that be something? This one, A. He struggled. It wasn't easy for him to get used to his new surroundings. He needed a few months. Third recording.
Speaker 3.
I'd been working as an archaeologist for about a year when I heard that Professor Harold Jones, a world-famous scientist, was putting together a team of experts to help him search for a lost city in Mexico. It had always been my dream to work with Professor Jones, so I immediately handed in my resignation and booked a ticket to Mexico. My plan was to convince the professor to let me be part of his team, even though I wasn't very experienced. Luckily, the professor was quite impressed with my CV and decided to give me a job. I've been in Mexico for 6 months now. It's been a wonderful learning experience for me, and I'm really grateful for the opportunity.
I'd been working as an archaeologist. Archaeologist is someone who works in the deserts searching for remains from ancient civilizations. For about a year, when I heard that Professor Harold Jones, who is Professor Harold Jones? He is a world-famous scientist, archaeologist, was putting together, he was making a team of experts, people who know a lot about archaeology, to help him search for a lost city, lost, cannot be found, in Mexico. It had always been my dream to work with Professor Jones, so I immediately I gave my resignation. Resignation is a noun, resign is the verb. When you resign, you formally leave your work, and booked a ticket to Mexico. My plan was to persuade the professor to let me be part of his team, even though, in spite of the fact that I wasn't very experienced, even though gives the same meaning as although. You can use although, but in a different way. You can say although I wasn't very experienced, and then you put a comma, I convinced the professor to let me in the team. Luckily, the professor was quite impressed. He admired my CV and decided to give me a job. I've been in Mexico for 6 months now. It's been a wonderful learning experience for me, and I'm really grateful, thankful for the opportunity, for the chance. This one, E, he took a risk that paid off. He left his work. He resigned, but it paid off. He really enjoyed what he did, and he got into the team. Fourth recording.
Speaker 4.
I'm a writer, and I had been struggling to come up with a suitable ending for my latest book. So my publisher suggested that I go away for a while. I decided to rent a small cabin near Lake Winston, which is about a 2-hour drive from the town where I live. I spent most of my time at the lake swimming, fishing, and admiring the glorious sunsets. The scenery was so beautiful that I took as many photos as I could. I must say, the experience definitely stimulated my creativity, and, by the time I returned home, I had thought of a brilliant ending for my book. Funnily enough, when my publisher saw the photos that I had taken, he told me he wanted to include them in a book on outdoor adventures. I had no idea I was such a skilled photographer.
I'm a writer and I'd been struggling. It wasn't easy for me. I was fighting to come up with a suitable ending. When you come up, you try to get an idea for a good ending for my latest book. So my publisher is someone whose job is to arrange for the sale of my book. He gave me an idea that I go away for a while. I decided to rent a small cabin. When you rent, you pay money, but you don't buy something. You just use it for a short period of time. A cabin is a small house made of wood near Lake Winston, which is about a 2-hour drive from the town where I live. I spent most of my time at the lake swimming, fishing, and admiring. When you admire, you enjoy, you respect. You see how beautiful the glorious sunset is. Glorious, amazing, beautiful sunset. Sunset is when the sun goes down and night starts coming out. The scenery, the views, was so beautiful that I took as many photos as I could. I took a lot of photos. I must say the experience definitely, surely, of course, stimulated, activated my creativity. Creativity is the ability of you imagining things and coming up with ideas. And by the time I returned home, I had thought of a brilliant ending for my book. Funnily enough, when my publisher saw the photos that I had taken, he told me he wanted to include them in a book. He liked the photos on outdoor adventures, outdoor, away from buildings. Adventures is when you try something new and it's usually a little dangerous. I had no idea I was such a skilled photographer. I had natural ability for photography. This one, D, he discovered a new talent, a new skill, ability. Final recording.
Speaker 5.
I've been working as an accountant for about 10 years, and I have to admit that adding and subtracting numbers all day long can get a little boring. Last summer, I decided it was time for an adventure, so I took a month off and went to stay with my cousin at his farm. I've always loved animals and was thrilled when my cousin agreed to let me help him with some of the chores. I was even allowed to milk the cows. Being so close to nature was wonderful, and there were moments during my holiday when I could clearly imagine myself giving up my job in the city and moving to the country. Maybe one day.
I've been working as an accountant. Accountant is someone who works with numbers for about 10 years. And I have to admit, I have to say, to confess, that adding and subtracting, when you add numbers, 2 plus 2 equals 4. That's adding. Subtracting is the opposite. 2 minus 2 equals 0. All day long can get a little boring. Last summer, I decided it was time for an adventure, so I took a month off, no work, a vacation, and went to stay with my cousin at his farm. I've always loved animals and was thrilled when my cousin agreed to let me help him with some of the chores. Chores when you clean, wash, and dry. I was even allowed to milk the cows. Milk here is a verb, it's not a noun. When you milk the cows, you get milk from the cows. Being so close to nature was wonderful. And there were moments, there was a time during my holiday when I could clearly imagine myself giving up my job, handing in my resignation, stop working forever, in the city and moving to the country away from the city. Maybe one day. This one adapted easily to a new lifestyle, living away from the city on a farm. Thank you for watching this video. If you like it, please share it with friends. I'll see you again next time, inshallah. Goodbye.